buenos días a todos y todas y
Good
bienvenidos.
day to everybody. Welcome to the regional event to prepare better for possible polycrisis lessons from COVID-19 pandemic. Let me start besides welcoming you to remind all the participants that this event has simultaneous interpretation for English and Spanish. So you can find the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select whichever language you feel the most comfortable with. So let's start our event on how to be better prepared for future polycrisis. COVID-19, as you know, actually revealed many regional and global vulnerabilities and has reaffirmed the interconnectivity of social, economic, and environmental networks. In today's event, we would like to reflect a little bit on what we learned throughout this crisis, some of the social economical impact that we saw through the pandemic, COVID-19 in Latin America and Caribbean, and also where were the measures implemented by the government, supported by the UN agencies to help with this crisis. What did not work as well, and how together we can actually give a number of recommendations to design policy that will help us actually to have a more just recovery and also to help with this uncertainty level and following crises are on the way. It is this it will allow us to actually reflect on how to create mechanisms to create more resilient communities, especially, looking with particular emphasis on gender disparity. We decided to look into different point of view, and we have the honor of having our regional director, Michelle Mouchet. She will give us a few words, and then we will have the presentation by Rita Ciara. She's the person in charge on the inclusive growth, the regional center of UNDP in Panama, and Guillermina Martin, the person in charge of the gender center of the regional side. Then we will have the presentation of a couple of different experiences that approach the impacts and response of the pandemic in the region from different perspectives. In this segment, we want to have Erika Matilda, UNDP in the Dominican Republic, Laura Pavon, Director of Social Development for Planning in Colombia, Ruben Martorreglo, Associate of UNDP in Suriname, and Luz Arad, is Executive Secretariat. To close the event, Jose Cruz will give us a few word manager of the Regional Center of UNDP in Panama. With this, let's start. Michelle, you have the floor. Thank you, my dear Almo. Good day, everybody. For me, it's a real honor to add my word to welcome you on behalf of the UNDP Bureau for the Latin America, the Caribbean for this event. As Almo mentioned, we will present in a document that has the mapping of the social economical consequences of COVID-19 in Latin America, the Caribbean, and adopted measures for its recovery. And through this document as UNDP, we want to keep contributing on the debate on public policies in a moment, as we all know, that's critical for the development in our region. This region is facing the effect of multiple crises that somehow are linked and, they have complex multidimensional crises and they generate new levels of uncertainty. There worsen structural inequalities in our countries, including the gender disparities. And to face these multiple crises, political, social, economical, environmental crises that impact the world, but even more acutely our region, it requires for us to rethink our public policies. It may require a new generation of public policies that will build societies that are more resilient and at the same time to be able to approach the structural challenges like the great inequality, low productivity, vulnerability, poverty, all of these limit the capacity that we have to face these multiple crises and experiences, our experience actually handling this like COVID-19 pandemic give us an opportunity the after the painful experience of COVID-19, now we can reflect, learn, and approach in a better way today's polycrisis. And it's actually a privilege to be able to share this space with all of you so we can think together on how we can take this learning, these lessons learned, how to look into our present and future to apply these learnings for better decision making and public policies. And from UNDP, with this view, we have gathered these learnings, these lessons learned through the pandemic to give relevant recommendations to face the context of uncertainty that the region is going through. And we're going to talk about this today. And from UNDP, keep on working to understand as best as we can to generate evidence that will allow us to approach these multiple and complex crises, looking for better ways to improve the way we measure the human development in a multidimensional way, as is well known by many of you in the report of human development presented in 2020. We present a new index of human development, adjusted by planetary pressure, where we want to reopen a debate about the future path that each country has. And going back to the today's reflection with the recent declaration of the end of the sanitary emergency by WHO, this is a timely time to reflect on the response we gave to this crisis. But we feel a number of new crises after this pandemic. And today's report allows to learn to be able to face better these challenges. The basic question is, what have we learned? What is going to be useful to use into the future? And we know that through the COVID-19 pandemic, inequality, the existing inequalities in Latin America and the Caribbean increase, affecting mainly women, the elderly, the young, migrants, informal workers, and people in poverty. After UNDP, we drive an integral multidimensional response centered on three basic priorities. One is support to the health system, multi-sectorial management of the crisis, and the analysis of the impact in the country. In 3 years after the beginning of the pandemic, we're still working on strengthening the response capacity, improve social protection, to promote gender equality through public policies, and rethinking the educational framework to close the digital gap, guarantee the access to services, and to restore the trust to the institution through the different sector of society. And within all of these contexts, we must also mention the importance of the tax policy plays in, we need to design a progressive, responsible policies under gender equality and to direct the resources where we need them most, mainly the social expense that will guarantee the well-being of the population and to make sure we don't leave anybody behind. As a response of this pandemic, UNDP is acting and responding as fast as possible in a very integrated way, creating a link between the humanitarian world and the development, long-term development vision with the objective of creating resiliency and response capacity as we face new crises. And as you're going to see in today's report, we have achieved great things in our struggle against inequalities. Today, panelists will share their experiences from Suriname, Colombia, Dominican Republic. Thank you very much for sharing them. And also the presentation of the pandemic impact, mainly on rural women. Without further ado, an opening to the reflection of our panelists, I would like to conclude these opening words with first thanking everybody involved in the preparation of this report, the panelists that are here with us today, and everybody that have connected to be part of this discussion. And I would like to call to that unity, that need of joint work to build a better future and more just. for the world and our region. Together is the only way we can overcome crises, strengthen our resiliency, and to create societies that are more equal, more sustainable, and more resilient, as is expressed in our regional program, which is the one that gives us the guidelines that UNDP in Latin America and the Caribbean. Without further ado, just again, let me invite you to keep on working together, full of hope, with a vision of future towards a better tomorrow, full of opportunities for everybody in our Latin American Caribbean region. Thank you very much again, and I'll give you the microphone while I'm. Thank you, Michelle, for summarizing the main learning lesson to highlight the value of this publication that contributes to reflect on what we learned in the past to generate better public policy to be prepared to future crises and to reduce the impact on those vulnerable populations, mainly women. And we're gonna go deeper in the content of of this publication with Rita Sierra and Guillermina Martin. Rita, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Almudena. We're gonna present that report, so let me share my screen.
Eso ha sido un viaje, me acuerdo al principio cuando hemos empezado
I remember at the beginning when we started, we said, okay, let's do a flash paper of our learning. This flash paper became a 2-year journey. Everything we have done with UNDP, supporting the government. And here I'm going to present some of the findings, and then I'll give the floor to Guillermina for the recommendations. We have worked for the past 30 years measuring the multidimensional poverty. And what have we seen for that for 2 consecutive years? For the first time in history, the human development is decreasing. Actually, we have seen this as an unprecedented crisis, a crisis that besides the pandemic also saw a great threat, which was the threat of war. And we have asked ourselves in the first 2020 report that obviously there was a model and we had to promote development model that will change paradigm. What have we done to present this map? You know, we have verified every term we have done along with the other UN agencies, SEA, the platform, data sources, the human development report, and some of the paper on growth policies to see what type of response we have given. And through the different findings, we have always asked ourselves 3 questions. What have been the general impact? Who has the who is the one receiving the most impact of the pandemic? And we have done a zoom in between the urban and rural to understand who was left behind in this pandemic. So we start with the first analysis of a labor market. Of course, in a pre-pandemic situation of their full informality, there was a drop of over 60% of labor participation in 2019 and over 57% of 2020. The face of these impacts always the women that used to work in informal markets and in sectors like service, tourism, and trade that were highly impacted. When we saw the gender gap, we saw actually a distortion pre-pandemic because it was the unjust social development. And then we assume and we saw which economical impact, okay, on which sectors. And we saw the most affected sector was tourism. 26% of the GDP of in the Caribbean, 10% in Latin America. And again, women were the most affected because 60% of women work in these sectors, among other sectors that were very well affected, like affected a lot, like construction and industries. When we read from CEPAL that 2.7 million people closed, which was 19% of the Latin American companies, we said, oh, this is actually an impact we have never seen before with countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, and Dominican Republic affected actually the micro companies the most. And then we arrived to the health consequences. If I was gonna be asked more than a health problem, the pandemic was more an inequality problem. And we can see that in terms of that, the health systems were affected a lot, where 70% of people that worked there were women. When there were women are in decision-making positions, only 28% were considered. We have seen the difficulty to access to services. This has been incremented in rural sectors, and there was an impact in the decrease of diagnosis that have impact health. So pandemic show us that
van a tener impacto en el tiempo. Eso
in
lo vamos a
10 years,
ver y también educación.
and we're going to see this in mental health and in education. Mental health has something that has hit us strongly, and the last data that we saw through UNICEF says that 43% of the women see in a pessimist way the future, and 31% of our sons say that they not see the world with optimism. When we move into education, beside the data that we have seen in this report, I would also like to take the data of a study that we just launched, interrupted learning experience that we have seen that COVID-19 give a decrease on educational results in Latin America and the Caribbean, and it has affected as the perception of learning and the learning and the concerning data is when we analyze that girls and boys of the poorest homes in rural areas, those homes with the lower educational level, we have seen that they not only did not have access to education, but the quality decreased as well. The data on mental health, on education, and women on labor work, we are very concerned about all of this, on what can be the impact on the intergenerational poverty when those young people, today's girls, are going to find work in 5 to 10 years. So this is an additional concern. What have we seen? We have seen how actually we have gone back 9 years to actually decrease multidimensional poverty. The pandemic actually allows to visualize how unjust are the social care. Indigenous group, 25% of them have been impacted. Also, the Afro-descendants and migrants as well has been affected, mainly the access to money transfer. And as we have said many times, the level of girls and women violence have increased as well. As we were working with all of this, as we were giving a response to this crisis, or to that crisis, through those 2 years, we had a volcano eruption in Grenadine, Lisa hurricane in Belize, tropical storm Amanda and Cristobal in El Salvador, Iata and Iota in Honduras in Haiti. Besides this crisis, we also had an earthquake in the south and a political crisis. So what does this mean? This means that we now had to give response to a polycrisis where COVID showed us that a conflict of systemic and complex risk will be our reality from now on. In a region that for the first time, we see 11 countries of environmental security risk, in a region where we have more islands with problems of the raise of sea level. This is what we have seen. This is what we have found. Actually, we learned. And let me give the floor to Guillermina to see what recommendations we have in this report. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rita.
Lo que hicimos fue
for this context. What we did was to understand what were the past response given by government, which past response was given by the UN system, and what response was given the UNDP. Out of the three elements, we also launched the learning and conclusions. We observed that 20 countries implemented new or extended the existing program for money transfer, including in some specific cases, focusing on informality and specifically on women that work informally. For example, the unique bonus in Honduras. We also learned that many countries did not open it. All the population felt that few the transfer given. The second element, that food programs actually came in really fast. Some countries with supplementary full food that was moved from the school centers to the house. An innovative example is Colombia, that actually returns access to the IVA for the most vulnerable families, opening up an important action. And there was a guarantee to basic access, lowering taxes, guaranteeing access without payment, mainly in water, sanitation, and power. In some countries, we said also give flexibility, lower the rates. So also the support, support for actually those people that were fired, those countries where they had the three-party dialogues, government, unions, companies, really fast they actually be able to have support in salary to work on their possible benefit. But as I said, this focus it was lacking in understanding the informality dimension. I would say the business actually helped a lot giving support actually to the small companies where they receive the resources, but the informal sector, it was even more behind. Respond on the government when in equality response thanks to the gender tracking. We saw three responses. So the first one has to do with transfers, but understanding the pre-existing inequality and social protection programs. We know by family tradition on the social protection system and social policies, women tend to be outside of some programs associated only to formalized labor. Your cares, every data says, we have said this many times, whole UN system where women actually became the person that took care of the partners. So we try to understand the dynamic of domestic work and care to be paid for. And in some countries, they actually gave something to this sector, but still with some elements of the complex response violence against women and girls. We saw that preventions were applied in some cases right away where face mask prevention, sandbox, telephone calls, but every prevention response was closed, and then the intrafamiliar violence increased. The complex family relationships that also got worsened. As we said, they were, helplines, eh, also mechanisms for complaints and others. The response of the UN system, a social economic response, sanitary response, and humanitarian response. And we see the social economic response of third. We took into account five pillars: health, people protection, economic recovery, microeconomic and multilateral collaboration, and social cohesion and resiliency. One of the most important responses also have to do with the work done by UNDP on three priority line in health systems to manage the crisis in a very inclusive multi-sectorial way. And we work on the governance, trying to understand the management and how the processes are supported and the analysis of the COVID impact we have seen with the heat, among other response or answer. Response that we're trying to understand and we have looked how to hear it. It's the communitarian social response that happen through social organizations and the community organization. So let's get to know these responses from rural women, and they are part of this net to be able to give future recommendations. So what learnings and recommendations for future crises? First, as we can mention, of course, we are already in a polycrisis situation, economic, environmental, and social one, with the debt crisis of many countries in the region. The fiscal policies is coming to play, and it also hits the social protection program, the access to services. But on the other hand, we have this capacity on how we have implemented fast responses that are adapted to crisis, and we should not lose them. 3 years went by, okay, that's it. There is no response directed to those vulnerable sectors. There are not responses with a gender focus on their digital frameworks, of course. So UNDP wants to deeply understand what at this moment in time these responses have been established at the moment of crisis that could be elastic and flexible, and they can be integrated through different government and national and global level to be able to have an adaptive view full of resiliency and fast response. As we look into inequalities. So if we can go back, please. So it is important to strengthen the social protection programs that we recently said, crisis of uncertainty, and to understand approach the causes of informality, mainly in the productive sectors. We talk about detailed report. This is just an overview. You don't see details going to the report. So we see to work actually in the information system of social registry, a serious problem that we have in the pandemia, that we knew those sectors that were the most vulnerable. Of course, we reckon those that recognize the transfer. We had an absence of the registers of the informal sector. So to understand better those people that have the higher vulnerability, how are they being affected? The social security, as we said, the formal sector with depth in the formal sector is set there for the informal one. This crisis, as the last report say, brings a great uncertainty as parallel to having these crisis situations. We also had electoral cycles 2020 and all of the generated social tension, conflict, and an increment of uncertainty that affect people, community, and society. To understand the policy, the government trade-offs on the political parties, the systems governance is important for crisis management. We have developed different recommendations for this. And finally, we finish and we'll give the floor to the specific experiences. The fiscal policy has been centered to rethink the fiscal policy and they align to the protection objectives and around the vulnerability. And so middle high social economical aspect, they may have been an alternative for with telework, but not to the lower levels. And educational centers, we saw, we said, we have need to rethink the educational framework, decreasing the digital gap, increasing the access to internet, among other things, and to actually look after the violence against women and girls, not only the face to face, but through virtuality, but also understand the different power struggles inequality of power. There's a chapter on power inequality, and we invite you to read all of this, to go deep, to look into detail. We have amazing national documents as well, full of recommendations and lessons learned. The objective is not to forget about the pandemic, but to build on the learning experiences. Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Guillermina, for telling us about the multiple consequences and interconnected ones in the region, but also for giving us an overview of the government response and the support given in this context. Let me invite you to download the publication in the LAC webpage. If someone can copy the link in the chat, please, where you can go and look into it. Let me give the floor to Inca Madela. She is in Dominican Republic, UNDP representative, and she's going to talk about how they have supported the recovery of the tourism sector of the SMEs, which is vital for their economy. Very well. Today from the Dominican Republic. In fact, I'm gonna actually would like to show you as our role of integrator to understand what happens in this type of multiple crisis and how we can potentialize this, not only the tourism activity, but in general terms in some of the elements of social protection and SME in general. What I'm going to share with you today is part of our history, part of our like institutional memoirs, something that we did quite different compared to our usual UNDP reports, very focused on specific results to escalate them, centering people. Rita, should I share or you are going to do it?
Como quieras.
As you wish. Can you share, please?
Voy.
Give me a sec. To move on, just like every big country in the world, Dominican Republic as well, we suffer, the social health, economical effects of the pandemic. So let me explain how we started doing the response. First, it affected all of us, but we were not all affected the same. Under this context, we put in the center the importance on understanding what is really happening. And in the case of SMEs, that is 98% of the labor in Dominican Republic, we know that the effect of the pandemic, 78% had to close their businesses, where we were able to see as well that almost 90% of the SMEs, which is most of the businesses in the country, did not have access to internet or business strategies to use digital media. And 84% didn't have any possibility on being able to do telework. We also put the inclusion of this work. We see what would it mean analysis, looking into it, that's not leaving anybody behind. The Dominican Republic, we also have, the LGBTIQ plus was being affected, and we saw that 52% of LGBTQI plus people suffer some type of violence. So it was not only that the violence index on women increased, and also the care burden, but this special collective also, the situation also worsened. When we look in people with disability, same thing happened. Over 70% of people with some type of disability did not have access to the necessary support, compared to the pre-pandemic times. Let's move on. This part is about response. We understood that the only truth at this time, it was uncertainty. So we basically put a lot into taking advantage of our global network and knowledge and searching in an accelerated way.
Soluciones. En este contexto, lo que vimos
In this context, what we saw,
lo que vimos y empezamos en caso de
what we
protección
saw,
social, no solamente implementar
if, for
normas
example, you're not going to
políticas
implement the social
estructurales,
economic
sino
impact
pensar
assessment
a tiempo
once,
real una
where
serie
we
de
actually in
estrategias y
real
series de
time we did a
pensar
series
en
of
las poblaciones que
analysis
están
to
en
know
las
what was
regiones
happening in
más
homes,
vulnerables de país.
mainly the most
Este
vulnerable homes.
análisis impactó lo que
This
llevamos a cabo
analysis
conjuntamente con varias agencias,
impacted,
fondos y programas
and we
de
did
las
this with different
Naciones
agencies and
Unidas,
programs of
muy
the
pronto,
UN in a very timely way by the end of 2020
en la ampliación
to
y horizontal y
2021
vertical
and
del
a
sistema
horizontal
de
and
protección
vertical
social.
enhancement of
De
social
misma manera,
protection
también pudimos
systems.
incidir, por ejemplo,
We
asignar
also
beneficios
assign
especiales
some
a personas
special
con
bonuses
discapacidad
to people with
debido a
disabilities
estos datos que no se conocían.
because of
Entonces,
this
esto era uno
unknown
de los
data.
elementos claves. En cuanto a los impactos y
Regarding the impacts to understand, exactly what happened in Dominican Republic, we also did the recovery assessment with a couple of agencies, and not only to understand where we were affected the most, but also to work with public policy, with the mid-long-term view, and to formulate the full polyannual plan.
de este importante instrumento de planeación.
Well, working to do the planning with this
En
information.
la misma forma también, debido
Also,
afectación,
because of this impact that was stronger to women, we were able to work with the formulation of international policies for care. Now we have the pilots of, take care of the caregivers, and this is important for social protection. To focus on this, where are the people that are the most excluded? The pandemic affected everybody, but increased pre-existing gaps, and in the same way, it created new inequalities. The SME sector, and especially tourism SMEs, understand the importance that they have for the Dominican Republic, supporting our institutional allies. We started to bring in what UNDP had developed in other countries. So how could we adapt the global and regional methods for the effective response in this sector? We did fast consultation countries like Ecuador and Mexico, and methodology and other, all of this really fast. Like we say in Dominican, we use actually slide transform, and we were able to move them into national policy scale. We emphasize the digitalization strategies, we digitalize them, and we supported the open SMEs throughout the country that are giving assistance to this businesses that's so important for Dominican Republic, to hand in hand to start reactivating the company using methodologies, guides that were very specific to drive the use of mobiles, internet, and we also emphasize on potentializing this activity in Dominican. And this is how we were able to impact over 7,000 SMEs. And looking into not leaving anybody behind, we actually start working with different programs where we added the social protection measures and to ensure that those people with the highest vulnerability will also take advantage and restart their own companies. And that's why we created three working lines that were quite successful. One was with migrants, another one with SMEs, is led by women, and also another one that has been really great. Also, the SA is in general. We also focus to work hand in hand with SMEs of people led by people with disabilities, some type of disability. Regarding the tourism sector, and this is one of the models in our organization from a systemic point of view through a process where we and supporting them. We start looking into see what could be a new model for tourism in the country where it could be more sustainable, full of people with resiliency. A model not included everything, so able to identify through this exercise. We actually reformed the concept of tourism towards the concept of visitors. Also, how can we apply this way of the work with the SMEs, the sectors, and to see the possible value sector like inclusive tourism, put a price to the natural capital. How can we take advantage of the digital advantages within our new reality and specific proposal that where we were able to mobilize over $1 million for this type of activities. We're also speaking with the World Tourism Organization so we could this be replicated in other countries as well. And to finish, Rita, I believe we didn't move the slide on time to look into some of the lessons learned of this focus in Dominican Republic. First, understanding the responsibility that we have as UNDP on first and amnesties, and absolutely can give us the differentiated focus to reveal really what is going on. Throughout the pandemic, we reduced 15, 20, we created 15, 20% of knowledge. We generate new policies, mainly on SMEs and social protection. Second, we role as intergovernmental organization, our potential supporting the institution to escalate the incidents for public policy. Our presence in 170 countries, the capacity, how can import and export, request solutions, concerns to this global network that represents 25,000 people that work in UNDP, but mainly the institutions within the actors that create the agreed. They went beyond the political differences. There was a social agreement where private sector was involved. I believe that also the bravery of supporting and looked everything the systemic way, putting people in the center and trusting a little bit without fear to potentialize this type of trigger or strategic plan where we applied the possibilities given by data transformation, innovation, and uniting the effort from society and mainly public-private alliances that actually gave an interesting open of measurements to increase development. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Inca, for these reflections on how from the UNDP office to be able to support the strategic sector, the SMEs, and achieve social economical recovery that's inclusive, that has actually driven local tourism. Now, Lara Pavón, the Director of Social Development from the Planning Department in Colombia. Welcome. Thank you very much. And just a clarification. Today, I'm an ex-official. I recently finished my cycle, but I want to share with you the Colombian experience because I had the opportunity through the pandemic to do some efforts regarding the transfers, support that we started. And until Monday, actually, as a result of this pandemic, as Colombia, we moved into the social home registry. This is what I would like to show you, our trajectory as a country and how important it was the pandemic. Actually, how the pandemic actually drove us, and now we have home social registries, which is basically what was mentioned in previous presentation, the importance of data to face the crises. Colombia had a great trajectory, with information system for social policies. We always had a system to identify the potential beneficiary. We call it the CSV. We always had self-reported information that in many cases is social economical. And with this information, we were able to order population from the poorest to the least poor. But right now, we have a import version of the system, but mainly Colombia, to focalize different helping programs have always been based on this system. We must really look in detail what we have found within every evolution, the efficient quality of information. And we also had information that it was not updated on the home, characteristics, socioeconomical aspects, the location. There's a critical thing also that we had that it had to do
Y eso es lo que nosotros encontramos.
well. And at that moment, the pandemic comes up. The pandemic arrived at a moment where we were doing a transition of the third version of the system to the fourth version. Sadly, we had not finished the fourth version of this band, so the information system, the database were not adequate to respond in a timely way based on the different supports that we could have implemented. What we did was that we started a master database. This master database integrated the information between the band 3 and 4. We united both databases to have the higher number of phones without leaving anybody behind. That was our main goal. And what we did was we did a crosses with different programs, data, and that's the information that we gave to every national entity. So also needed information and to be able to implement different support. And that's why we have the master database that have allowed us to move forward. In this slide on the right hand side, we not only have the administrative aspect, but we also started with a process of finding those people that were not receiving any support from any government program. And those people that did not receive any support were the ones that were most difficult to contact. We didn't have any updated data. So the master database and the efforts that we did after this to reach these populations with transfer, it was locations, contacts, through many, many strategies and looking through different health administrative, educational databases. We're looking for information that will allow us to contact people. This was a great effort that we did through the pandemic. And the first reaction that we received as a country was through transfers, that it was mentioned at the beginning. We established extraordinary payments additional to those whom that were already receiving support through different transfer programs for families, young people, and the elderly. We also implemented a package of support. And through this package of nutritional baskets, where we also use social registry, the database that we had, and the master database. Because for this nutritional basket was through the national government, through the different agencies, but also different territorial municipality entities. So there was a great demand by the territorial, inform government for this database. And we also put new programs on non-conditional money transfers. Someone mentioned at the beginning about returning the taxes, and this was a program to face the pandemic. With this program, that because of the pandemic, the implementation was accelerated and it was escalated. And of course, we had the solidarity income program. Program was designed exclusively for those homes that, because through the administrative database and the master database, we identified that did not receive any type of government support. So the fast response to the Colombian experience to the pandemic was the Solidarity Income Program. And this is what allowed us to move toward our master data and homes registry. Through the pandemic, there was a decree law that created social home registry. And this is part of the learning that we had through the beginning of the pandemic and the need to have updated tools full of the required information. So because of that, we created the home social registry. At 2020 is when was this law that establishes that we must have mandatory by every entity that they should share this information, because to create this, we started with a few challenges. One of them, it was to have that the security, the legal support in the use of the information. So this decree law, the regulation shows that we were going to give the guarantees of this information, and the exchanges needed will happen based on the functions of each entity. Now, for about a decade now, we have been feeling in need of having this information, administrative updated information. But just because of the pandemic, is that this is driven into this launching, which is the home social registry. This was last week, this month. We were able to consolidate this registry. This was allowed to first to have an updated information regarding social economical information. This is very important because in Colombia we have seen the evolution of how home has changed, social economic aspects of home have changed a lot through the decades, to be able to trace the different supports received by the homes. This is also important because under the pandemic, the first question of the government was, we know what each home is receiving, are they protected or not? And that information, the only way to have it is to integrate in every registry, not only the follow-up of the national offer, but we want to consolidate territorial information because many territorial entities also have special transfers. So we needed to know all of this information at the moment of crisis. Articulation also, a good experience that we have with the capital is how we were able to coordinate the different efforts to be able to respond the best way possible. A social registry and the master database allows to have an effective coordination. And this is the structure of the social registry. Today we have nationwide databases with social economical data, administrative registry of access, integration of social programs, and territorial database as well. The integration of all of these different registries now allows to have updated, comprehensive information, and this way we can act at a moment of a crisis to know how the population is doing today. And these are the main benefits that we got from this registry. They help us with the coordination, planning processes, a better capacity to respond in a crisis, focalization, follow up, and to improve government-citizen relationship. I know I went over my time, but I wanted to tell you a little bit how we've been restructuring the whole social registry and the importance of moving forward and consolidating this tool, this very recent tool. We just started making the efforts from 2020, and just this week we launched it, and we need to potentialize it even more. Thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. Very, very important for us. Very, very important to look at this from the government point of view. And we know how important has been the access to improve the social register, the information system on focalization, and the challenge that it represents. And we from UNDP, we also know the importance of not leaving anybody behind, our main principle. And that's why we would like to invite Ruben now. Ruben will talk to us about the Suriname experience for indigenous group. Ruben, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Almaneda. Good morning, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by thanking the organizer of this event to include the country office Suriname to give us the floor to share our experience and our work. Let me share my slide. I hope you can see it by now. I will be talking about our experiences in engaging specifically with the indigenous and tribal people during the COVID pandemic period. Just to set the context, the indigenous people represent 4% of our total population. Our total population is about 600,000, and it comprises of at least 4 major tribes. And the important aspect that I think we need to take into consideration is the fact that they are living mostly in the deep rural and interior districts of the country. So in that sense, they are excluded from most of the basic services and also marginalized through history. For instance, one of the main aspects that needs to be taken into consideration is the land rights and also their basic rights as human rights, which is still not anchored in our legislation. COVID-19 has also put their vulnerable position under pressure. Strategically, they are depreciated from basic services, but more so on health. And you know that during the COVID pandemic, health and health services is a key aspect in regard to support of any community, and especially among the indigenous and tribal community. Another aspect which is also important during the COVID pandemic period is the language barrier. Most of these communities has their own language, and the national language which is Dutch. In most cases, information, including information regarding COVID, has been disseminated in Dutch, which means that these information are rarely or difficult to be absorbed by the community. So in that sense, there is information gap during COVID period. This is just the map is just to give you an idea how the spread of the indigenous people are in the country geographically. What we also have is tribal community, what we call Maroons. These are descent from the runaway slaves, and they are also living in village setting, in traditional community setting. what have we done as UNDP country office so far? We have technically led the UN-wide socio-economic impact assessment of COVID-19, and in which 10 agencies have participated. Coming out of that assessment, it's clear that the ITPs, the indigenous and tribal people, are one of the 12 most vulnerable group when it comes down to the impact of COVID-19. We've also conducted a rapid digital socio-economic impact assessment on the indigenous households. It is a digital assessment. You can imagine that right in the heat of COVID, there is no mobility possible. So digital is one of the means that is available for us to get information, to get feedback from the communities. And we're lucky to have great support from the Crisis Bureau and the Regional Hub, technically, but also financially. What came out of this assessment is that there is high levels of poverty among the indigenous people. And they are also experiencing reduced income during the pandemic season. There is minimal financial security. And as we have known before, there is lack of, or at least inadequate access to basic social services, including water and sanitation, and also food security. We have captured also the experiences of this assessment in a systemization exercise, and just to document the experience and also to share the lessons learned with others who may be interested in conducting a similar exercise. With all the results and the insight that we have developed through the UN socio-economic impact assessment and our rapid digital impact assessment, we have formulated a mitigation project specifically for the indigenous and tribal people. And we were successful in applying the rapid financing facility for funding this initiative, where we were focusing on the prevention and mitigation of the further spread of COVID-19 among indigenous and tribal people. We have also looked into mitigating the social and economic impact and piloting interventions to stimulate economic resilience. One of the important initiatives that we undertook under this project was to assist the women, the indigenous women and tribal women in developing skills. And we took the production of face masks as one pilot initiative. Reason why we did that, the communities has a shortage or non-access to face masks as preventive measure. And this is also an opportunity for women to contribute in the supply of the face masks at one hand, but also provide them skills, new skills, which they could benefit in earning an additional income or earning income. And this initiative has been very successful. And in fact, there has been a request for continuation of this initiative because the women noticed that with this additional skill, they have improved their position in regard to economic resilience. What we have also implemented with what we call additional core funds, the Track 2, is supporting the improvement of social transfer, especially in relation to the indigenous and tribal people, especially given their physical location. It was a difficulty, a challenge for the government to provide financial transfer to these communities on timely basis, because the transfer was done physically by cash. So they have somebody or a team has to travel to the interior to hand over the cash to these communities. And you can imagine it is an expensive undertaking, especially where there are areas that doesn't have a infrastructure or road system. So they need to travel by boat and then maybe travel on foot or charter a plane to reach these communities. So that was an expensive undertaking, and we have supported the government to see to what extent modernize and more modern system could be adopted. And we also link up to what is captured in the macroeconomic reform program established by the government and implemented with support from the IMF. And within their social chapter, it includes an element of what we call financial inclusion. Although our resources are limited, we have been able to support the ministry who is responsible for the cash transfer to upgrade their system, working on the standard operating procedures so that they are ready to implement financial inclusion as part of the macroeconomic reform process. We've also helped the ministry to adopt an automated registry system and test that within certain districts. And also building on our experience and the good response, positive response that we received both from the government and also from the indigenous and tribal people represented by their umbrella organizations. We have developed successfully, UNDP has the technical lead. We have developed a joint program and applied SDG joint funds for this program, what we call Leave No One Behind. And this program is meant to take our intervention, our support at the next level by helping the government, helping the communities to develop what we call a policy, an integrated policy, but not just policy to improve the living condition, but also the position of indigenous tribal people. We want to conduct the policy development through a full participatory inclusive process. This is new for the country. There is no framework for participatory policy development. So we are now in the midst of implementing this joint program. We started with this joint program in April last year. And the process of consultation, engagement in the process of policy making is now taking place. But at the same time, we have also we are also addressing the issue of water and sanitation, the livelihood development issue, but also food security, together with colleague UN sister agencies like UNICEF, UN Women, FAO, and UNFPA. So those are the areas of interventions. We try to build a sustained contribution and not interject into an opportunistic and ad hoc opportunity, but we try to build a structural contribution to improve the lives of the indigenous and tribal people beyond COVID. What have we learned during these exercises? I think it's important to build genuine partnership, and in our case, we have, as UNDP, has been strong and taken a leadership position in regard to building partnership locally, both to the public entities like the government and government departments, but also with the communities themselves, the indigenous and tribal communities, through their umbrella organizations. And we have experienced that respect and trust is a key element in the process, because without the level of respect and trust, you may not get the communities especially to participate and respond to the intervention that you want to implement. Another aspect that is also important, once you engage with the community especially, you create a level of expectation. So you have to sustain the engagement, and that's why it's important to have a more structural, programmatic approach rather than opportunistic approach. We're lucky enough, I must say, that within our CPD, we have highlighted the engagement and improvement of capacity of the ITPs as one of our pillars. A second important lesson is the inclusion and adherence to FPIC. The inclusion should be a genuine inclusion and not just a demonstration element. A third important lesson is understanding the worldview, the culture and beliefs of the indigenous and tribal people. That's the only way you can understand their needs and the way they approach matters, issues, etc. And as a last experience, lessons learned, is the continuous adjustment of project and program strategy and planning, especially during COVID pandemic, because a lot of those elements that may help you to achieve success in the project, in implementation of project and project, may change continuously, and you should be able to adopt. But on the other hand, also in adherence to FPIC, it results a substantial delay in decision making, especially among indigenous and tribal people. So those were our experiences that we would like to share. I can go deeper into the details during the question and answer point, but mindful of the time, I want to thank your attention and over to you, Almudena.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Rubén. Es muy impresionante ver cómo la
It's
digitalización
amazing how the digitalization has allowed us in this closing season, to keep on working with the most remote areas. Let's give the floor to Luis Aros, the Executive Secretary to Red Lag. He will give us the civil society vision, the impact of pandemic on rural women, and what we still need to face. Luz, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Good day. I'm here listening to everything that has been shared, and it's amazing what has been done throughout this pandemic year. And from a general view, first, I would like to thank UNDP for this opportunity. Michelle, the regional representative, on behalf of the most, humble women in the field beyond the color of our skin. We have the indigenous, the mixed ones, white, whoever may be out in the field producing. From a general view, we believe now more than ever after the pandemic years that the world must acknowledge and value the input of women in the field. It may be indigenous or whoever they may be, because we are the guardians of the life, of the natural resources, of the seeds, these traditional seeds free of transgenics that actually guarantee to add to food security. Also from the medicine to the pandemic, the grandmothers retook the use of their own plants, the flowers, the leaves, the roots, looking into the ancestral medicine to take care of the land, nature, and us. And that's why we believe economical, as social economical programs should also have a positive reaction to generate the new opportunities and improve the women's quality of life. Those country women, many men actually migrated before the pandemic, many have come back. And as one of the women said, and we're going to tell you what we did with the pandemic, said the man came back becoming a son. So they had to be the caregivers of everybody, including the men. So we feel that the investment of governments must be decentralized. They struggle to do cement structures, but they say they don't have resources, they don't have money when it's about investing in rural communities. The farther away from the center, more complex it is. I just heard Ruben said, when he said it was expensive, it was expensive. Of course it was. It is expensive because if I see where I am at, there are many rural areas where you can only reach in small planes, and some others just water, depending of the weather, of course. So this actually conditions means that we need to have investment to elevate the quality of life in this community where girls and boys of 2, 3 years of age have actually its tummies are inflated like pregnant women because of parasites. So we need to be sustaining, and many of the head of household women need this support. And we still going through economy of livelihood economy and against climate change and natural disasters. We will remember that about 2 months ago, while the countries in the south in the America like Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, the cattle died because of lack of water. In Mayeca, in Peru, people were dying because of flooding and river overflowing. So these are the changes we're seeing. And we talk about microeconomy, how many actually farmers, small farmers may have the access to be able to sell their produce through the SMEs that hopefully they can be solidary and will take the actual products of the small farmers. So the pandemic affected in a drastic way because the product could not be moved to the city because people could not mobilize. So our daughters, granddaughters created these chains to take the food to the cities where people needed, and trade started. So all of these things we saw, and this actually happened in the Amazonian as well, and the communities are further away. And of course, the problems, the further away, the biggest the issues. And one of the things that we have to say is that the land breathed. It breathed for a year, 2 years, because the world actually stopped. And there was the pollution drop. And this was something positive that happened. For example, it was said that in Madrid, they started seeing actually things that they never saw before. They saw peacocks and animals were walking around and they just reappeared finally because they could breathe. And all of this inequality that came even before the pandemic, it just started generating this higher inequality because of gender, rurality. It's always been so complex, you know, some more complex than others because we didn't have quality services or quality goods, communications, Ruben just mentioned, and of course, and if we don't want anybody to be left behind, we need to make governments aware, mainly local governments, on the importance of investment in rural zones to have better conditions to even move our products and to be able to have a better profitability. So all of these good and services that are right, really, that should be guaranteed, guarantee the access to health, justice in the rural area, almost there's zero justice. Safe water, we still have muddy water, grabbed from rivers that have come down being contaminated. 16% of connectivity in the whole country without access. Crisis in educational terms that we're going to see with all due respect. When I heard the great event, I said the triple burden for rural women. It's not triple, it's fifth, it's five burdens because we're women, citizens that have to be the self-care that I heard Buenos Aires, but we are wives, mothers, farmers, and on top of that, we have to guarantee that the girls, our sons, daughters, grandchildren, also for them to connect to virtual, you know, actually schools. But if the mother actually it doesn't read or write, how can they help? So those are the huge gaps, that come from the previous decade. Rurality, again, families with 4 or 5 children, minimum 3 children to educate, And if locally they have one computer and no connectivity, or they had to move for kilometers to be able to download the information that teachers sent. And they didn't have quality cell phones either. And they had to walk around looking for private companies' connections. This has been the real situation. So the digital gap still the norm, and it's a debt. So in the middle of the pandemic, we ask ourselves, okay, they may stop our feet, but not the heart and the mind. So we need to do something. We need to be creative, not to be alone or leave anybody alone. So from the Rural Women's Network that I, as Ecuadorian farmer, am in the executive secretariat, we start being creative. And we said, okay, what we did potentially is do it virtually, no matter the gaps. So we started with the information schools, virtual information schools. And some colleagues said, hold on, I cannot turn on my camera because I'm under the plantain leaves because it's raining and I don't want it to get wet and those type of things. And sometimes three run to a neighbor's house to be able to connect all of them together. These are real things. So I believe today more than ever, the topic of the, the six must be a right, a real rights to approach technology, to exercise the rights, to lower expense, improve quality of life, to say that we're producing. So all of this to do, what did we do? We started working with the virtual information, and we started to do it in virtual events. We have done amazing webinar. Thank you, Disarmina, for supporting us on this. I acknowledge this, and we need to acknowledge what everybody did. We UNDP had retaken the relationships in Ecuador with Jose Mariner, which I don't know where she's at right now. So we took this relationship and has been a pillar for us. They don't leave us behind. Thank you very much. So we start proposing to the UNDP, besides the support to go to the international events and all of this, also to do it virtually. So we propose a few things. Among those few things, we did a study on the situation of rural women in pandemic time. And I think UNDP had to be very patient. Guillermina, Andrea, if you're around there, you were the main ones. We don't want for this research to happen from a death. We want our leaders, the women leaders, to be the articulators, the actors, the actual protagonists. And this is how we went into 16 countries. We did it with 16 countries, all the way from Mexico to Chile. So what did we do? We contacted we all the consultant. Paula was one of the main ones. He said, I have to re-adequate the methodology. This doesn't work. I need to remove this, changes. I was telling Paula, this is not a consultancy. It's not right. And she said, no, this is quite different because on top of that, with our women leader in each of the 16 countries, had proposed meetings with them as focal points, but also with other focal groups, and for them to look for women, above 16, from red flag or not. If they're white, black, brown, whatever, over 16 adults, diversity, interculturality, diversity. With them, we did a survey, and of course, they had to be printed to take it printed because women did not have access to internet to fill it digitally. So they had to take the paper. In Panama, they were saying, hey, I had to print it because there was no other way. They had to print to take everybody the page. So thank you for that study done. And hopefully soon we can speak about it deeply. But now that we are here in this beautiful time and webinar with this result, what has happened to the pandemic. Now, first of all, we're alive, I don't dare to say colleagues because you're at different levels. I'm just a farmer. So the consultancy is to research about the inputs and women's situation in Latin America and the Caribbean. And the main objective was to compare, review the impacts, the vulnerability that women were going through within their quality of life facing COVID, right? The scope was, as I said, for this investigation to be doing in, in this that could not be presential, even virtual, yes, but also the leaders took the papers to be filled out, doing interviews from time through WhatsApp. I think that's worked quite good, my dear. I think we farmers lost the fear to WhatsApp and Zoom. Zoom and WhatsApp, Zoom and WhatsApp. We lost the fear of them. Those are our main communication tools with 1,000 difficulties, of course, to maintain the meetings. Sometimes we have to do a second or a third one, but we achieved it. So the scope, as I said, from Mexico to Chile, we wanted to look into more details. I can say was Chile, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Argentina, Brazil, Dominican Republic, Panama, El Salvador, Paraguay, Uruguay, Colombia, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Mexico. Those are the countries that were reflected in this study done throughout the pandemic. The methodology was to research with mixed methodology, as I just mentioned, and a design that has been replicated, and the colleagues received the information and they printed, went back to the community, the organizations, to the surveys, a collaborative implementation model. Women in the center, so they could be the actors and the protagonists, so they can have the trust that Ruben talked about to be able to actually have trust. You need to be there, even virtually. We had to learn. And when we talked with Jermina, we said, oh my God, it's so great to be able to see you in person and hug you. But now we know how to use these tools. So these surveys were applied with this combination of different media, the investigation with, with an intergeneral comprehensive view, ethnically diverse, and the effects of the pandemic are not homogeneous. Of course, they're so heterogeneous. The pandemic actually revealed what was happening. And I mentioned at the beginning, every inequality was shown. And in Ecuador, it was awful how the deaths of pandemic were thrown on the street. It was so shameful. And how the politicians that were in the government, they just negotiated for cartons and plastic for people that were dying in the street. Actually, it was shameful, a worldwide shameful situation. The overload, as I mentioned, as I said, for women, it's a triple burden. We have 5 burden. We are tutors of boys, girls, being illiterate, and then looking for internet. I was telling my niece, going to school, oh, and I have to move over there, Chimborazo community where there is no signal. He said, no, I have to go to the over here, over there. There's a lady that have a machine and she's printing everything so they can, to receive those classes. So this happened. So this is overloading in the rural area. The burden is times 5 or more. Women were affected in their own autonomy, especially economic autonomy, because we couldn't sell the products. But we said, let's keep on producing. At least we have something to eat. At least to have the necessary things. And some we went to the city to trade, salt and sugar and things, to sweeten life a little bit. So all of this cosmovision in a horizontal way was solidarity. This is my reflection. What a macro mall went to ask the people from suburban area, do you need anything to eat? I'm sure no mall, nobody, no big, nobody went to this area to ask, what do you need to eat? if it happened, let us know. But our farmers, everybody got together asking people what do they need. They moved to whoever could went to the city to do trades and come back to support the neighbors. Among the lesson learned will be first to know that united we're strong. You know, on our own we can ride faster, but together we're stronger. The other thing we learned to lose the fear of virtuality. With the use of WhatsApp and Zoom, we can communicate. This training school was our support, and some colleagues actually that said, "Oh, God bless this school, that I have hope and life." So that's the result. Our proposal now is that hopefully in this post-pandemic time, this one, because this doesn't end, to regenerate this from people from the urban to value, acknowledge the work without salary or time from the rural area, but to actually value our work, to pay for the just price for our product, for the product to be valued. But we also want to keep on working, and today more than ever it's important for the organism as you are doing to support us to officially declare the decade of the rural women. We've been asking this for since 2012. I think that after 10 years, I think now we can actually do more to have better public policies, to have a document to say, see, Mr. Mayor, government, regional government, whoever it may be. This is what the international agreements say. This is not a favor. This is a need, is to guarantee the well-being of the community. It is said that 2050 or something million of people will die. We actually allow your services to be the pillar of the community development. We only want better public policy that will allow us to stay here, to be able to keep on producing, to give food to the world. Thank you very much, Luz, for this very important intervention and for sharing the experience of rural women, as you said, suffer a series of challenges and structural inequalities, and they were worsened by the pandemic. And we're so pleased the UNDP relaxed study, that we will soon have the results and we hope to share. Let me take advantage before closing the event to celebrate the team that actually created this document that I hope you are all downloading. Pizarrita, can be hearing Marta, Guillermo, Marta, and Ronaldo Santos. Congrats. We have arrived to the end of this event within their voices from society, government, UNDP, civil society. And the idea is to have a comprehensive overview, not only to reflect to the response to a COVID crisis, but future crisis. Before closing, I would like to give the floor to Jose Cruz Osorio, manager of UNDP Panama, for final reflection and for the closing of the event. Jose, yours. Thank you very much, and I acknowledge that we have gone over the time, so I'll ask you for your patience, just a few more minutes. I share a lot of reflection, that of Luz is amazing what we've been able to do. And I believe that in fact, we are in the recovery phase. We're still facing multiple crises and many crises to come. It made me remember also Luz's words that were, you know, our survival is in challenge. And what is a miracle to be here, to be able to hug each other, but it also requires the capacity to be able to respond to these risks that we still don't know. No, the study itself, the reflection and experiences presented this morning reflected this capacity to be able to create multidimensional integrated response under polycrisis context. We have the capacity, and this is the optimism we should look at it. At the same time, through all of these responses, I believe that it highlights something very important. I think need to have very rigorous analysis to be able to measure and diagnose the impact of mainly the populational groups that face the most structural, inequalities. We have seen the case of rural women with Luz. Ruben also gave us that overview with the indigenous groups. And in the case of Guatemala, it's also the importance of the registry, user registry, to be able to identify the vulnerable groups. In the case of Dominican Republic, I also believe it's very important how this vertical and horizontal expansion of social protection has avoided the worst parts of poverty. So I believe this is a very important this analysis. We have heard about many lessons learned, but perhaps I would like to highlight mainly the importance of the work and the responses that should be integral, multi-sectoral, and multi-level. This is very important, not only to be able to promote the coverage of universal social protection systems that are as so important in this context to face this public crisis, but also to understand the new risks within these new complexities of inequality, how to approach this inequality and to take advantage of the opportunities of the information technology, the different ITs that actually can facilitate, better responses with larger coverage. And just to conclude, here, UNDP, we hope that this study can be a reference not only for the decision makers, but also those that create public policies. And we hope that this document has actually is read. I hope you all read it. Thank to the panelists for sharing your knowledge, your experiences, your lesson learned. The participants, thank you for being with us this morning and the organizing team that have made possible this webinar. And I would like to add my word to the recognition of Marta Alvarez and Renata Pavos, because without them, we wouldn't have been able to do this study. It was a great effort and work. And the three advisors were very clear and they supported this. And to end, I would like to acknowledge our commitment and collective action has been shown through the content of this study, are proof of the determination and human resilience to face and overcome present and future crises. This is a necessary collective effort to create the equal, just, prosperous future. With this, let me close today. Thank you all and have a very good day. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. We hope to see each other soon. Thank you for the opportunity given to for the rural women.